So, Peter, you've been following the COVID situation globally. You've been following COVID vaccines. Tell the viewers what we can expect from the COVID vaccine and how soon we get back to some normalcy with, I don't know, people going back into the office, for example,
Sure.
buildings being occupied, that kind of thing.
Well, I've got two pieces of really bad news and one piece of really good news. Bad news piece number one. We're now at record deaths, record hospitalizations, and record cases in the United States. The current case surge predates Thanksgiving. We've been building in this direction for 2 months. By the time we get to December 12th, we will probably not just be at record for hospitalizations, but we'll be at double the previous peaks, and it will continue going up for at least the rest of this year and at least for all of January. We've done a horrible job at the federal, at the state, at the local level. Private industry, universities, everybody has screwed it up, and now we're paying the price.
How have they screwed it up specifically?
Well, at the federal level, there was never a plan for a distribution of PPP or PPE. And in fact, you had the federal government in many cases contradicting themselves and saying it wasn't a good idea. At the state level, every governor assumed that what was happening in the next state over would never happen there. So there was no preparation. Corporate America lobbied to keep things open, and they lobbied to keep things closed. So there's been no consistency. I would say universities are the institutions that I have the most anger for right now because, this is supposedly where the smart people are. And the decision was made to have classes in person. And if somebody gets sick, you send them home so they can infect their family instead of being quarantined on campus. And a lot of universities at Thanksgiving just said, don't come back. They just said, we don't want the liability, so take your germs and go. And this story has happened over and over and over in the United States. We just haven't been able to get a grip on it. So left to its own devices, we now need a lockdown of at least 2.5 months that affects at least 85% of the population to get this under control. We've never managed that. Our first lockdown maybe hit 50% of the population. So we're looking at this just spiraling through at least the remainder of the winter. That's the bad news. Good news. We have 2 vaccines that are both in mass production, and we should have rulings from the FDA within the next week or 2 on both of them. That would allow us to start distribution before the end of the year to medical personnel, to long-term care facilities such as nursing homes in January, and then probably getting into folks whose job makes them natural vectors. Everybody from an airplane pilot to a bus driver to somebody who works the desk at Starbucks, all of them probably in February. The general population for everyone probably by April. And that assumes that the 3rd and the 4th vaccine that are currently under development don't prove successful, and they probably will. So we're looking probably at 4 vaccines in the mix before the end of the first quarter. That would suggest that in the United States, we will be able to get to the 60% of the population who says that they want the vaccine to have the vaccine before the end of the second quarter. And then we will have functional herd immunity nationwide. There may be some pockets where there's holdouts, but honestly, it looks like everything is coming in together, which is great because we're finally there. But that brings us to the second piece of bad news. It's not just the United States. Every consumption-led economy in the world is in a situation more or less similar to that of the United States. So for most of them in the first world, they'll be able to get the vaccination before the end of the year. But for the developed world, you're looking at the following year. So the global system is going to remain more or less online for at least another 18 months.
When should the general public start seeing vaccines being advertised that we can actually go, you and me, people like us, go and get a vaccine?
Probably April 1st. Now, something to keep in mind, we don't just have one. We're going to have 4. They all have their own distribution systems. They all have their own manufacturing system. And the more we have, the earlier that date is likely to be. But I think April 1 is a good stake in the ground.
And then that means that by year end, 2021, be Is this a one-shot vaccine or two? Hold on.
There's the Pfizer and the Moderna ones are the two that are out right now that are going through approval that we'll know within a week. Those are both two-shot vaccines, 3 weeks in between. Then you've got the Oxford one, which the reason we don't know more about it is they kind of screwed up their manufacturing and a lot of people got a half dose. So the data doesn't make any sense. That'll probably be a two-shot as well. And then the fourth one is the Johnson and Johnson, and that's a single shot.
Okay. So by year end,
Probably a lot sooner. Assuming we start general population inoculations on April 1, it'll probably be done for the people who want it by the end of June.
okay. So here's the real question. When do we go back to work in the offices, back to restaurants, retail stores open up? When do things look like they used to be?
Well, that's never going to happen. But in terms of general being able to go out and have the option of doing things, assuming that we get 60% of the population inoculated, 80 would be better, 60 will work. You can probably see things starting to open up for next summer. So figure June. But again, for vaccines, this might actually happen a little bit sooner. The problem is going to be is that we've been in some degree of being offline by the time that this happens, for over a year. We've got a proper recession we've got to grow out of here. We're not going to be able to just snap our fingers and make that go away. It's going to take 3, 6, probably closer to 9 months after we have normal health conditions before we can actually go out and interact in an economically viable way.
Okay, so let's go back to my same question one more time. Office buildings, when will the commercial real estate market, forget the market, when will the people actually be in the offices and they can't have an excuse why not to pay rent?
They will have the option for most sectors probably starting July 1. But something to keep in mind is, we've had this secular shift in how we do business work. Business travel isn't going to pick up for at least 2 or 3 years. Hell, Google told their staff, we are not even going to ask you to be back into the office until July of 2022. We realize you need to sign a year-long lease. So you go do what you need to do. And as soon as you have to be back is a year and a half from now.
All right, that's the technology sector, so I get that. But I'll guarantee their distribution centers are packed full of people.
Absolutely. I mean, we're seeing an overhaul in how we do commercial real estate. It's never going to bounce back to where it was because people are always going to be able to insist that they can work from home competently. And now they've got a track record with data provided by their own employers to prove it. Also, we've got a lot of relocation within the United States demographically. We've got people who are retiring, so the baby boomers don't want snow. We've got the millennials who are having kids and they can't afford to do that in a high rise. And then you've got people who are scared of being in the vicinity of mass transit systems for health reasons. And all of this is drawing people away from the major coastal cities in Chicago into the south, the southwest, and the west. Obviously, that reshapes commercial real estate patterns. Obviously, that reshapes residential real estate patterns.
Okay. So, given what we just went through, and the last question I'll ask you is somewhat COVID related to it, is now that we have gotten used to wearing masks, being more hygienic, washing hands, always disinfectant hands, does this also mean future pandemics are less likely to take effect? Plus, we've had some experience, and what we're used to, the flu, does it become less communicable?
Yes and no. For those of you who are in airplanes a lot, especially on the West Coast or the Asian Rim, I'm sure you've noticed that during flu season, a lot of Asians are in masks in the airports. We're probably going to see more of that here. They're just a little bit more cognizant of it over there because there's more of an interface between people and tropical climates. And so the chances of having a bug jump species is much higher in sub-Saharan Africa and East Asia than it is here in the United States, where it's pretty much all temperate. So we're never going to go completely back. That will pop up a little bit more. But something to keep in mind, the mechanics that we've become used to, the logistics, the health concern issues, the distancing, the mask, all of it, all of that is designed for a respiratory illness. There's nothing to say that the next illness is going to be respiratory. Maybe it'll be communicated through the eyes or closer contact. So it's difficult to say that we're going to be any better prepared in terms of personal actions. The real question is whether or not we've got the research capacity at the CDC and other things in the federal government that's looking into these things, that's decoding. And the fact that the two big vaccines we're dealing with, Pfizer and Moderna, are both a fundamentally new method, mRNA, and that they did that in 10 months. That's where the hope is. Because if we can decode this stuff and bring it into production on a very short time scale, and if the first time we did it, it only took 10 months, that's where I have my hope for the future. The fact that we can actually decode these things in a matter of days and then get it into circulation in just a few months.
Well, very positive, I guess very positive outlook. Even with
There hasn't been good news for a while. Let's take what we can get.
Exactly. Well, I hope you all really enjoyed the enlightening interview and conversation with Peter Zeihan. He's certainly on top of things, very prescient. His best-selling 3 books, United Superpower, Absent Superpower, and Accidental Superpower are some of the best reads and great holiday gifts for sure. I'd like to take this moment to also encourage you to watch this next 30-second video from Feeding America, give you a little more information, and consider making a contribution, a donation, maybe even as instead of customer gifts, a gift in the customer's name to Feeding America. From my family to your family, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and a much better and wonderful New Year. God bless.
Did you see anyone's brought this? Is this your bird?
We'd do anything for kids. Yet 1 in 6 children in the U.S. struggle with hunger. Help end childhood hunger near you. Learn how at feedingamerica.org.